One of the reasons I wanted to do this video was because we Windsurfing UK have had the opportunity to test both of Slingshot's 2019 Levitator 150 and Wizard 125. Because of that, we're being asked questions in terms of comparison between the two boards. I know recently Wyatt has just put out, Wyatt being Slingshot's brand manager over in the States, he just put out a couple of videos sort of detailing the actual two ranges, but in terms of this video we're sort of directly comparing the two, mostly because we're getting questions about the two boards and how they differ and sort of what are the advantages between the two boards. You know, if you choose the Wizard, what's the advantage over having that? What's the advantages having the Levitator over the Wizard, and so on and so forth. Been fortunate, like I say, to test them, but I actually spend quite a significant amount of time with both of them, and there are differences. I mean, you can see straight off, even though they're both the same length, okay, so they're both 6'6", okay, you can see the shape is actually inherently different between the two. The Levitator, there's an obvious difference there, 150 versus 125. So 150 litres worth of volume versus 125 litres worth of volume. So the Wizard 125 is 31 wide, whereas the Levitator is 33. So they're the two sort of obvious differences just upon looking at the two board shapes. If we come over and I lay them down on their backs, like so, you can also see straight off there's a difference in terms of what foil box is actually on the board. They're a similar design in terms of they've got the cutouts on the tail to sort of help with that early planing and induce lift, but obviously the Levitator, you can see, has got the pedestal track box, whereas the Slingshot Wizard 125 has got the deep tilt box. The Levitator is probably, certainly the 150, is probably more your entry level board for those starting out. The reason being is, and one of the sort of justifications for incorporating the pedestal track box is so you can tune where that foil sits according to the rider. Rider weight, rider build, rider ability, and so on and so forth. Anybody who's foiled or windsurfed knows that body makeup and sort of proportions of a rider require a different setup. You know, I'm 86 kg, 5'11". How I would want my foil to sit in the box of a board versus the size of sail and where the foot straps are, etc. The whole configuration would probably be slightly different to, say, my wife, who's 55 kg and obviously a bit smaller, you know, less bigger bone, less burly, less grunty, etc, etc. So they've put the pedestal track in so you can actually move the foil backwards and forwards accordingly and tune it specifically for the rider in question. Whereas the Wizard 125 obviously has the deep tilt box. Now, that's not to say that there isn't a raft of tuning options, because there are, because you can still position the foot straps wherever you need them, rig where you need it, so there are plenty of tuning options there as well. It's just with the Levitator, it just gives you a little bit more fine tuning on the foil so you can get used to it. Obviously there's a width thing going on as well. The Levitator, as we've already said, is 33 wide, whereas the Wizard is 31. The 33 wide Levitator will give you a little bit more leeway in terms of foot positioning. If you're not quite tuned in with where your feet need to go, it'll be a little bit more forgiving than the actual 31 wide Wizard. The Wizard, you know, the Slingshot are describing that, or at least Wyatt Miller describing that as their sort of flagship board. And as much as the Levitator is suitable for entry-level riders, he was also suggesting that the Wizard itself would also, you know, accommodate those looking to get into foiling for the first time. It's just out of the two, Levitator would be the more forgiving one versus the Wizard, which is slightly you know, more manoeuvrable, more nimble, more lively feel once you're actually on the water. The Levitator sits a little bit more planted. Even when you're up flying, it's actually a little bit more sort of planted and therefore a bit more forgiving. One of the biggest things is actually, if you look at the nose on both boards, they're very progressive, very forward thinking. The super short boards, and to be honest with you, when you get on the water, both boards, they deliver quite a unique feel that if you're coming from windsurfing, which the majority of you will be, then it takes a little bit of dialing into, a little bit of getting used to. The advantages of having a short board, you know, widely promoted. Obviously the guys at Slingshot do this all the time. They talk about the lack of swing weight, the fact that once you're up and foiling, that shorter nose means that you're not so susceptible to wind gusts. So the board actually, when foiling, both boards when foiling, actually remains more stable, and you're not going to get blown off course as much. But it is a very unique feel and very, very different to what you would find on a normal windsurfing board. One of the biggest things is actually glide. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, both boards, the majority of the volume, more or less, is up back of both boards, and you sort of have to trust in that a little bit. If you try and sort of push your weight forwards, you know, imagine you're trying to get planing for the first time and you're sort of crouching down, you're pushing with your front foot, you're pushing the nose forwards, trying to overcome that bow wave. You're actually not trying to do that when you're foiling, you're literally trying to induce the lift from the foil, so therefore being further back is actually necessary to sort of get your weight over the foil and almost induce the lift of the foil with your body weight and the rig's power, etc, etc, which is why these boards are designed as such. Like I say, that takes a little bit of getting used to, because they don't actually have that much glide to them. That means that with these two, you sort of don't have as much of the taxiing phase. So anybody that's got any experience of foiling will know there's an initial phase just before you lift off where the board sort of almost planes, and it's sort of like half foiling, if you like. You don't actually need to do that with these boards, because of the design and combined with the actual Hoverglide foil system, particularly with the bigger wings. So the Infinity 76, that, you know, is the Hoverglide foil package, that's what it comes with, or the bigger bigger wing, the 84. They actually induce so much lift that all riders have to do on both boards is actually just step back into the foot straps before you've even got going, sheet in, push down, maybe give it a bit of a pump, and up you come. Okay, on some other boards you need to sort of get going first and almost get into that sort of half planing, half foiling sort of planing mode, and then you kind of lift off. That's a bit more apparent in the sort of with sort of higher aspect wing foils and such like. Once you're up and foiling on both boards, you know, it's a lovely experience, sort of back and forth. They're very stable. You're much more upright than some other sort of boards as such, and it gives a very comfortable foiling position. Another area that newbie foilers will potentially need to get their heads around and skills dialed into is the sort of transitional phase, so the jibing. Okay, so like I say, these have got no noses really. You can call them a no-nose board or as such. So when you come round into the jibe, into the foil jibe, a lot of times people sort of either come right down and sort of do that touching the water planing jibe. Where you might struggle with these two boards is if you come in foiling and halfway round or 2/3 of the way round you then touch down. The chances of breaching, i.e. the nose dipping under the water and therefore causing you to crash, is a lot higher on this than on something a bit longer. Between the two, the Levitator, because it's got a bit more volume up front, actually tends to glide through the turn a little bit more, so it's a bit more forgiving than with the Wizard. The Wizard really doesn't like that sort of planing exit, if you like, where you're touching the water. You really sort of need to work on the foiling jibe to get the best out of the Wizard 125, and again, that's trusting in the volume on the tail. Quick foot changes, straight into the foot strap. You know, you've seen technique videos online. It's very much trusting on both boards of that volume at the tail to get the most out of it. Otherwise, you will tend to breach a little bit more, particularly with the Wizard 125. And if you go smaller on the 105 and the 103 Wizard, well, there's the nose on those boards comes to around there, so there really is nothing at all. Also, as well, on tacks, non-foiling tacks, you know, with the best will in the world, we'd all want to stay on foil. Unfortunately, you do have an issue in some areas, certainly here on Hayling Island on the south coast UK, where the gust consistency isn't necessarily on any given forecast, not every time, but there is an issue with gust consistency. So sometimes you do drop off the foil, and therefore you need to keep upwind. For instance, if you've got a southerly direction pushing you onto the beach, you need to be able to tack to stay upwind and in the deep water away from the shallows. With the Levitator 150, because there's more volume up front, it's actually easier to get around the mast. You don't nosedive as much sort of through that part of the tack where you change size. With the Wizard 125, there's a little bit more concentration needed, and you need to be a little bit better at tacking off foil. Tacking on foil is actually easier, to be honest with you. But like I say, at times we need to do things where we're not fully foiling, so it's worth just keeping that in mind. And again, if you go for the Wizard 105 or 103, then tacking is nigh on impossible, because there's even less area in front of where the rig will be. So the Levitator 150, a little bit more forgiving, but not quite as nifty and nimble as the Wizard 125. The Wizard 125 is by far, out of the two boards, the most lively feel, but there are some areas of using the board which need a little bit more concentration than on the Levitator. Obviously the Levitator has that pedestal track, so there's a bit more tuning on that if you're getting used to it. Once you can foil, then you know the configuration of the Wizard 125 is absolutely fine, particularly when used in conjunction with Slingshot's Hoverglide foil system. So he's therefore the Wizard is a more performance orientated board. It's as simple as that. It is a progressive shape. It's both boards in fact are progressive shapes. They're examples of Slingshot thinking outside the box and trying to move the sport on and actually making equipment specifically for foiling, rather than here's a windsurf board, let's put a foil on it. And actually, once you get dialed in, once a rider gets dialed into the short length and the sort of the way the board is actually designed and performs on the water, it becomes extremely addictive. The Wizard 125 in particular, if anybody's had any experience of riding a tandem windsurf board and you've been the one up front, you can see the water in front of you, because it's the same on a tandem as it is with these sort of no-nose boards. You can see the water. It feels like you're actually floating, levitating. So the Levitator is actually aptly named for that board. If you can see the water, it feels different. It feels nice, and like I say, it's very, very addictive. I will touch just quickly. The straps from Slingshot are actually, I really appreciate the straps. You know, these quick adjustable straps. There's no sort of undoing Velcro and messing about. It is literally a case of thumb release or yank the webbing strap on to change the sizing of the strap, which is really, really good. I like that. There's a slight thing with twisting of the straps, so you might need to put an insert in just to make them, you know, not twist as much. That said, they're both really, really comfortable boards, and yeah, depending on your skill level, depending on your wants and needs, would obviously dictate which one you would go for. There was a question as to whether you would go for the Levitator, you would outgrow that particularly quick, maybe, but actually I've been, and there are photos online of this, I've been able to forward loop on foil the Levitator 150, so it's got loads of performance in it. Obviously it's a lot easier with the Wizard 125, which is lighter weight and more performance orientated. That was a big gust, but both boards, you know, offer loads of progression and are just super fun. It's just a case of, as with everything, getting out there. If you can, get on them, demo them, try them, see which one you like, compare with our reviews which accompany this video. If you've got any questions, let us know.